husbands, and families. With the creation of this conference, that dream has been realized. After launching the Smiling Mask, our connections with mothers have reaffirmed our mission. The problem of postpartum depression is widespread, and as you have heard today, it does not discriminate, regardless of race, education, or social stature. Although the symptoms vary, the universal thread that links all of us is the mask. Together we carry the immense weight of shame and sadness. As women and as mothers, we like to judge ourselves. In order to destroy the stigma of PPD, we need to come to a place of forgiveness and love. I would now like to share my story with you. In February of 2003, I became pregnant. My husband and I were overjoyed. My best friend Kathy was pregnant at the same time. We had planned to do everything together. We had planned that our children would grow up and be best friends. We believed in the fairy tale of motherhood. We never knew that we would each experience motherhood in a different way, and it was never what we expected. When I was 20 weeks pregnant, I woke to a phone call from the Medicine Hat Hospital. The news that day stunned me. My best friend's baby was dead. She was 33 weeks pregnant, and the long wait for her firstborn ended in loss. I was heartbroken for her and shocked, and I vowed to be there for her. And for the next 4 months of my pregnancy, I grieved alongside her, and I began to internalize the pain. I carried what I now know is called survivor's grief, and I began to obsess that my son would be born dead, sick, or deformed. I did not believe that it was fair, that I had a baby boy and God had taken hers. On November 17th, 2003, I gave birth to my son Cameron. He was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and I felt instant love for him. After heading to sleep for the first time in 48 hours, after a long and grueling labor, I woke at 5 a.m., screaming and crying in a cold sweat and panicking because I'd had a nightmare that the nurses had brought me my son and he was bloody and dead. Later that day, I began to hear a voice inside my head saying the word smother, 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 over and over again. And I began to see violent images of myself harming my son. And I remember walking into the bathroom and running the water and looking in the mirror and screaming inside, saying, "What the hell is wrong with you?" But I kept it a secret that day. I dismissed it. I thought that the voices would go away. The following day, the voices continued. They were saying something else. I finally broke down and admitted this to my husband and the doctors at the Medicine Hat Hospital. I was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis. I was put on an antipsychotic and an antidepressant. My husband and I were shocked. We had never heard of this before. I would say I was very naive, and I knew very little about postpartum depression. had skimmed over the information in the baby books, thinking, that won't happen to me. I'm excited to be a mommy. I was kept in for a week and stabilized. And I remember phoning my mother and initially trying to hide my secret. Because how do you say, Mom, I've gone crazy? I explained that I was having trouble breastfeeding and that things weren't going so great, which was a total understatement. And when I mentioned I was going to be put on medication, my mother's first reaction was to discourage it. When I finally broke down and admitted my symptoms, she was silent, but she agreed with the decision. My husband and I thought that this was going to be a temporary problem. We never foresaw the long road ahead. Luckily, the voices stopped in the hospital, but I battled the obsessive thoughts for the next 4 years. I was ashamed of my illness. We lived in a small town in Alberta of 1,000 people, and I chose when I went home from the hospital to keep it a secret. My family were 5 hours away. My husband went back to work, and only one friend knew. I fooled all my other friends. I even fooled myself. I lost every part of myself. I was a walking, breathing, thinking shell of a person. I was medicated with a cocktail of Risperdal, Zoloft, and Ativan. Didn't have trouble sleeping. I gained weight like crazy. I gained 40 pounds with the pregnancy. I gained another 40 afterwards. The weight that was supposed to be melting off, the old jeans that I wanted to fit back into, they got thrown in the garbage. I was not myself. And so my self-esteem plummeted, and I was exhausted at all hours and hungry to the point of starving. I would look at food and get fat. At one point in my illness, I was on 4.5 milligrams of Risperdal. While working, while taking care of my child and the household. Nobody told me that this was a high dosage until I had a nurse and told her my story. And she looked at me and asked me, shocked, how are you getting out of bed in the morning? How are you functioning? That dosage could tranquilize a cow. No wonder you're exhausted. And day after day, I lived in a terrifying world of fear, shame, and sadness. I'm going to explain to you what it's like living with my symptoms of postpartum obsessive compulsive disorder, which my diagnosis was later changed to. I want you to picture your worst horror movie, and I want you to pick a scene, and I want you to flash to it right now. How does your stomach feel? Now I'm estimating, but I would say I had 5 visions per hour, and I was alone for 8 hours a day with my son. That's 40 visions per day. Now a panic attack doesn't seem so unreal, feeling uptight, feeling hopeless, and the trauma of those thoughts to my mind, body, and spirit. Those visions plagued me for the last 4 years. And the pain that I harbored was so deep because those obsessions were about my little boy. And I